All right, welcome back to the Exertis Almo Podcast, where we talk about all things Pro AV and things that matter to you, our systems integrators. Okay, so I gotta say, I went to InfoComm this year. One of the things I saw a lot of was an aspect ratio 21:9. And I thought this was really interesting because it's been around a while, but I hadn't seen it sort of make its appearance at a major trade show. Gaming shows, esports world, yes, but at InfoComm. So I thought we should talk about this on the show to better understand why, what good it's for, and what the changes are kind of, in the world and using it. So to do that, why not bring on somebody who actually knows what they're talking about? So with me today is Mr. John Robson from Legrand AV, here to talk to us a little more about the aspect ratio. But before we do that, John, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Nick. Glad to be here.
Me too. I love when we have guests on. It's more fun. If not, it's just me babbling. Okay, but before we go down the aspect ratio side, talk to me about yourself. What do you do at Legrand?
I am based out in the Pacific Northwest. I work with the end user market, consultants, architects. My role is to introduce new products and ideally develop specifications in cohort with them so that they can bring new solutions to their customers and
well, yeah. And it's interesting because when you start talking about the consultants, that's usually something that is, I don't want to say multi-years, but oftentimes it's projects that we're not going to see for a year or 2 years or 3 years because the consultants are working so far downstream, it would be very important for something like this because you're having to work with them on products that may not even be really out yet, right? Kind of helping them for the future designs.
Yeah, actually, that kind of works both ways too, because particularly with architecture, as buildings change and so forth, I'm also a feedback loop to the product teams as well to say, this is what's going on, this is what's trending in the marketplace, these are the areas that they want to go. So you're absolutely right. Some of the products aren't there yet, but by being that interface, I'm able to provide feedback. Likewise, for them, I can say, this is what we see trending. Also, some of the tools that you may need to properly specify, even if that product is available today, there's going to be another iteration of it because it is a good solution.
Yeah, no, I mean, working with the consultants is so important because that really, sets the tone for the whole market and it's great because then you also get to develop, as you said, kind of what is necessary because they're working on sort of cutting edge, bleeding edge opportunities for how people are going to work in the workspace next.
Yeah, and a great example of that, even relating to 21:9, is we're seeing a lot more buildings with the floor-to-ceiling windows. Mm-hmm. So you've lost a wall of real estate in a building. How are you going to put, say, a screen in there? So we have products like Sightline that have no backdrop that essentially suspend a 21:9 screen by that window, and aesthetically it looks great. And then when you're not using it, it's out of the way. You get that window back.
Yeah, no, and yeah, we talked about this a little last time you all were on the show, was that your company is in a unique position because you are working with so many product solutions that you're not, a camera company, you're not just a microphone company, you're not just a screen company. You have so many different pieces of the puzzle that you're really in a unique position to understand how it's all going to come together. Right. And that's rare because most manufacturers only focus on just a niche of the overall story. And y'all have your hands in sort of every piece of it. Talk to us a little bit about that. I mean, the bigger vision that you all are able to bring.
Well, there's no doubt all our brands bring their own individual assets or features or benefits to them. But as we've grown as a company, we are working together to look at those total solutions because things are moving more in that direction. And what's a total solution for a conference room, or as they call a conference room in a box, which I always like, and I actually come from a background in consumer electronics. When home theater came up, it used to be disparate components, and you would create a home theater in your house, which was complicated. And I think we're moving in the same direction that the consumer electronics is moving, which is they created home theater in a box. So that's a one-stop solution, very easy to install, faster to install, and it works great. And I think we're moving in that direction in the commercial space too.
Before we go too far down the 21:9 aspect ratio conversation, which we're going to do, what I want to, so for the audience who's just kind of, going 21.9, what's that? So aspect ratios are basically the measurement of how tall by how wide, or by how wide by how tall, right? And in the sort of the if we all put our Wayback Machine hat on for a minute, I mean, for the longest time we had square monitors, and then those monitors started to change shape, and then there was this big digital revolution, which everything went 16:9, so it went widescreen. Right. And in the film world, there's an even wider version called CinemaScope, which is really wide. But effectively, that's what we're talking about here, is that we're taking the aspect ratio that's ordinarily not square in nature, but rectangular in nature, and making it even wider, right? Giving us more real estate. So I think the team is going to throw a graphic up on screen, or did already as we say this, that's going to kind of demonstrate that and show kind of what that looks like. But that effectively is 21.9 aspect ratio. Is that about right, John?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's I believe everything is filmed in like you said, the CinemaScope, which is essentially a 21.9, right? So it's when we used to go see films that were square back in the 50s and 60s, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, I didn't get to see.
We tend to follow that.
We kind of think of it more of as almost like a CinemaScope, or something you would see only in a theatrical experience. But it's moving now over to the conference room space, right? And it's sort of becoming the trend there. Talk to me a little bit about why.
Well, I've always thought about this too, is that we are consumers at home, right? We have our TVs, we have our remotes and everything else. And what frustrates us the most is things like, why do I have 5 remotes? Why do I have to do this? How many buttons do I have to press to get to the experience? So why all of a sudden are you now a tech savvy person when you go into the office? It should be as simple as it is at home. And I think 21.9 was sort of born out of this a little bit, that I want that same cinematic experience that I have at home. Make me comfortable. Don't make it, if you take screens, for example, that is a more cinematic view for you versus looking at a display or dual displays. You don't look at dual displays at home. You look at one display. And how are you sitting around that TV, right? You've got your sofas and chairs. So why not try to recreate a more home, more collaborative looking experience in the office as well?
Now, how much of this, from the office standpoint, is being influenced by, say, like Microsoft Teams and their new front row layout? Are we seeing some of that being driven by them?
Absolutely. So the front row experience, there's a couple of things there. There's actually quite a lot to speak about there. I think Microsoft in particular was looking at a way to make the team software, more collaborative. So with the new Teams front row experience, you've got life-size people in front of you. You're sitting around a camera where you're completely stitched. There's that meeting equity amongst everybody in the room versus there's Bob at the end of the table that you can barely see. So that brings that whole collaborative space there. Then with the 21.9 real estate, you've got that ability to have all those people on the screen, the same size as you. And then you have that extra real estate for content and chat and so forth. So it's, and I think everybody's moving in that direction as well, but Microsoft for sure is moving heavily into the 21.9 space.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, because in the old days of video conferencing, I think before front row and some of these things started to become more apparent, was that the moment somebody shared something, everybody was pushed to the side and minimized, right? Yeah. And you sort of, now that we're all on this 24/7, so to speak, it's that lack of face time, so to speak, starts to wear on it, and it just becomes about the content, less about the people. And I think that's, it sounds like from, sort of the 21.9 piece is what brings that. Yeah. So, I mean, what are you as a manufacturing bringing to the table to enable 21.9 conferencing?
So there's two types of displays out there. Obviously, you've got your general, LCD, LED displays out there, such as Jupiter, right? So we have mounts from Chief that allow, it's a big display, right? So that ability to mount wall mounted, whether you want it landscape or portrait. So we have a mount for that. Basically, we call it our Jupiter mount right now, there's sort of a catchphrase for it. But it also is meant to be a universal mount in that respect. Now, one of the things with a display like that is that you've got to meet ADI compliance, because it does come out more than the 8 to 10 inches that you need there. So we also have our 10-inch credenzas that can go underneath that, also housing any equipment that you may have, and makes it look pretty. So that's available through us. But the one that is really taking off for us is our sight line from Da-Lite. We have multiple SKUs, which are obviously projection screens, so you don't run into the ADA compliance. It's about half the price in terms of what you can deploy with projection. And what I particularly like about it is it's much more cinematic.
This is interesting because when you think about, like, when I say, hey, we're talking about 21:9 aspect ratio, everybody goes, cool, we're going to talk about flat panels and projectors, but that's only a portion of the conversation, right? I mean, the mounts, how the cameras auto frame, I think that's an interesting concept, because utilizing that space means we need to have the sort of everything in the chain of custody be enabled to support that type of aspect ratio. So there's more to this, effectively.
There really is. There really is. On the camera front, like for example, our Vaddio IntelliShot with the auto tracking, that's available for certain room types, and that is about tracking. And so on a team scenario, it is sort of pulling that person when they're speaking. That's the person you're going to see, but they just kind of, essentially, I don't know if you've seen the front row experience, but your head kind of gets a little bigger when you're talking. That's about it, but you can still see everybody in the room.
Yeah.
And again, going down that audio path, you'll probably start seeing through DSP the isolation of the voice where it's coming across that screen as well. So that's sort of the next thing coming.
Yeah, the audio stuff is getting really intelligent right now in that way.
Yeah, and there's other cameras out there to be able to deal with larger rooms. So we're in that space. We continue to grow in that space. The other part is the furnishings as well. Gone are sort of the rectangle tables. Now it's about having an arc table around the screen in some of the bigger rooms, or tables that what are called like a guitar pick type table.
Yeah, teardrop design almost.
Teardrop design, so that everybody can be seen. And you're seeing 21:9 going from a room with 3 people in it up to a room of, say, 20 people in it.
It almost reminds me of the old, going way back in the day, the old telepresence rooms, right? Where everybody was sort of spread out, and everybody had an individual display, and you were one-to-one with a person, and sort of as the idea of a hardware codec has kind of gone to the way of software. We're sort of bringing that experience back, but in a way that the room is usable for more than just telepresence.
Yeah, and and obviously the movement into wireless, bring your own device, just walk in, you're there, it recognizes you, it says hello to you, and so forth. That's all in the works. And I had somebody say to me once before, like you were talking about these, essentially there are no new ideas, only better executed ones, right? And I think with the new technologies that are out today, you can now execute something far superior but the idea was always there, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the idea's been there, but it's been relegated to just very niche audiences. And now it's, I think, hit sort of the forefront of this actually makes sense in a conference room, right? Because we moved away from standardized devices that only support, say, WXGA or UXGA or some of the old Visa compliances of the past to now, like, hey, we've got the computers capable of presenting a larger palette, more pixels. Why aren't we using more pixels to present our story and our conversations?
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting. And if we think about it, like for me, projection screens have always been the moldable, flexible spot, right? I mean, projectors have been sort of, there's always been a range of projectors that can hit different resolutions. I remember back in the day when things were, 1900 by 1200, and we were going taller rather than wider. So it feels like projectors have always been very flexible. Do you see any of that coming in the flat panel world where we're going to start to see wider display flat panels, especially large format ones?
I don't see why not. Even with direct view LED, you still have that kind of framing. You can kind of see it every once in a while. Right now, speaking of the conference room, though, everybody has dual displays. We're seeing people with dual 80-inch displays, right? And the problem with that is that you're kind of jumping from one screen to the other while you're watching. Well, that's fatigue right there. And so why not blend them together and just try to make that a better experience? So it's a whole experience. And I don't see why that's any different in the digital signage space as well. So I think it's here to stay. I think it's going to be heavily adopted. I do think companies like Microsoft are going to have a heyday with this whole new front row. And of course, we're there to enhance that experience wherever we can through our products. We're pretty committed on the 21.9.
So I think you brought up a really interesting point is that, that since flat panels don't really fit that mold without, running multiple, then projection screens really are the keystone technology here, because you're able to sort of hit that 21.9 aspect ratio perfectly and then just marry the right projection. So talk to me a little bit more about where you all are sitting in the projection space with the screens right now.
Well, so I can tell you we have, basically we can do a 21.9 in almost any size if we wanted to. But right now we're looking at anywhere from 104-inch 21.9 and in the diagonal up to 167. Those are the latest SKUs that we put out on Da-Lite, which are being specified as we speak.
Which is still larger than any existing flat panel in the market at this point. Right?
It is, and it's easier to deploy. It's easier to remediate the existing rooms that you have a projector in there, and to be able to put that 21.9 up there. It's a low cost of ownership to remediate to that. And again, I kind of go back to this whole, let's get people back in the offices. So all these companies are really looking at how do you do that? Right? People are liking to work at home. So it's kind of like saying, hey, there's a new movie out. Am I going to watch it on my TV at home? Or am I going to go to the theater and see it in IMAX? Right? So I think it's not just the screen, but it's a big part of it is how do I make the environment in the office appealing for people to want to come in and really enjoy being there and being able to collaborate, which is what these companies really want.
Yeah. Well, and I think if you listen to some like Apple with their recent announcement of, hey, 3 days a week back in the office, pick your days. I think that's because they're allowing people the flexibility to sort of choose. I think that leaves us with a space where we're always going to see a hybrid environment, meaning there's going to be people in the conference room and there's going to be people not in the conference room, which then makes 21.9 even more sort of necessary in order to fit everybody in the screen, in the camera angle, sort of, and even add into that sort of the sight lines, right? As even because within projection, we know there are sort of premier spots to sit, and then if you're too far off to the side, you're going to start to lose, some of that direct view. So this wider aspect ratio allows you to have more people at the table, and more people on the screen.
Yeah, and from what I've seen from various demonstrations and so forth out there, people really like it. And the companies that have had that opportunity to see that demonstration really like it. It's definitely, I think it just fits kind of the market we're in. And even on top of that too, Nick, why not have 21.9 at home for the employees that are working at home?
Yeah.
So there's a ubiquitous experience that's end to end. And I know that's being looked at as well. And somebody will say, well, if you're doing 21.9 at home, why would you want to go to the office? And I do come back to that. Well, you're enjoying that collaboration. Why would you not want to kind of go into that office and say, hey, I do want to be with people and we're all experiencing our collaboration the same way?
That concept of equity, making sure that your experience as an employee is as good in the office as it is at home. And to me, that's a productivity tool, right? A good camera, a good microphone, all those things so that you can be seen at home when you're not in the office. Well, productivity wise, having that type of display means I can get more on screen, I can see more, I can do more, right? And so that goes back to sort of one of the tenets, I think, of your organization, which is, building that equity layer. It's a powerful tool.
Oh, it is. And we're looking at all of it. And we do have that variety of product solutions to enable these experiences to be better. We don't have all of it, but we certainly have a lot of it that can make it better.
So we're talking a lot about like sort of like the value of going 21.9, all the pros. Since we are here trying to educate sort of the client base, the designers, the world. What are and cons is sort of the wrong word. I don't want to say what's the negative, but what are the things that they need to be thinking about in moving their deployments to 21.9 and moving to projection over flat panel? What would you warn people to start thinking about ahead of time?
Oh, definitely with the architects. One of the biggest challenges is room remediation, because typically in a conference room that's a rectangle, you have all your power and feeds down at one end. And in many cases, particularly with the larger displays, you want to have it over on the longer wall with the arc table around it, right? Well, if there's no power and feed there, you have to remediate that room. So the ability to use the existing infrastructure has challenges, and but we things like Connect Track allow us to do that, with full roads. But long term, the architects need to start considering, not unlike your house where you have a cable outlet on one side of the wall and a cable outlet on the other side of the wall. There needs to be more of that infrastructure built into the newer buildings. I think that's the number one challenge, is remediation, because the cost of install or the cost of remediation, over the years, an install has been a lot simpler and faster. That is an impediment to that. So when people are considering 21.9, they should consider their power and signal feeds where they are.
All right, so let's take this back. So if we talked a lot about projection and where kind of projection fits on this. Let's talk about flat panels. We'll go back to the flat panel conversation. So what does Legrand offer for rooms that are going to sort of tackle the 21.9 with flat panels?
Yeah, so we have a new mount out completely dedicated to, it's a wall mount for a 21 display, both in landscape and portrait mode. So obviously there's a lot of weight there when you take in the Jupiter. I mean, you're at 200 plus 300 plus pounds on that. But I think we'll probably start seeing more models, right? The other one is we also have the works. I mean, typical with our Chief product, we're going to have a cart version of that. Primarily, Chief is very much in sync with what's coming out from display manufacturers. So that's why we'll see products that tend to be in unison with anything that gets rolled out. So anything that's a format change like 21.9, anything that's a format change in direct view LED, we're going to be there.
Yeah, this because this goes back to the real comment where I feel like Legrand is one of the few manufacturers that sort of you can uniquely adapt because you've got so many pieces of that puzzle. Right. Yeah. You can, with the mount, the furniture, everything sort of comes together. So you have the ability to kind of step back and say, oh, look at this trend. Right. And adjust all of your, product lines for it. So I'm going to go. So from a display side, let's go back to just for a second, because of the pros and cons of things here. Mm-hmm. What are the things that people need to be thinking about if they're going to do this with flat panels versus projectors? I mean, are there ADA compliances, other things that they need to be thinking about in these designs?
Yes. So ADA compliance is a factor for sure. Particularly with direct displays, when you do have products that they are coming out 8 inches out from the wall, 6 inches out from the wall, you have to factor that in. So that's again why our Chief Middle Atlantic collaborations, we recognize that and we deliver products for that, such as our C3 credenza, which allows you to have that below, and you've now met ADA compliance. Right. So that's one there. So the other part is budget, right? So right now, as any new screen technology, it tends to be, much more expensive, but we're still dealing with the traditional projector now with a different screen type that really does cut the cost probably in half. But things evolve, and prices are always changing. But there's some real benefits to that because you can use the existing infrastructure in most cases. So all you're really doing now is changing out a screen, changing out your projector potentially, and that's about it. Now that said, you also want to change your furnishings because it's an experience room, not just, hey, we've got 21.9. Okay, great. You got 21.9, but you still got that rectangle table down, right? So you might want to consider the room layout as well. So I think those are primarily what you have to consider. And as I brought up before, the remediation, do you have the power and signal path where it needs to be for that? Now, one of the other things, if you don't have projection, there's ultra short throw projection, right? So we have that capability to bring the 21.9 with potentially ultra short throw. We don't have a solution for that yet, but that would be definitely something that we would want to show. So it depends, but your short throw has to be back further, a little bit further, right? So now you're back potentially either on a floor piece for that or a ceiling piece. But the floor piece tends to be a little better for 21.9. But you still have to run into ADA compliance scenarios there if it's in a pathway. So those are the considerations, I guess. And then the other thing with the 21, just one last thing, which is actually kind of funny, is the 21.9 display itself. You better make sure you've got the right freight elevator to get it up there.
Oh, because they're so big.
Because they're so big.
Take out a window and run it through.
Yeah, it could be that too.
Awesome. Well, listen, John, thanks for being on the show. It's always enlightening when you or the team comes on. This is good for the audience because we get to learn sort of what's next. Or what we should be keeping an eye on. So the team is going to put some show notes in. You do have a website that's sort of dedicated to this, I guess a microsite that's focused on 21.9 and educating the masses. So we'll make sure that's going to come up on screen here in a second, as well as in the show notes. So if you have any questions, you want to know more, by all means, please hit the link in the show notes to find out more about 21.9. John, it's been awesome having you on the show.
Nick, pleasure. Enjoyed it. Hopefully I'll come back and have some more updates for you.
I would love to have you back on. There's this market changes constantly. So thank you for educating us.
Okay, thanks.
All right, that's it for this episode of the Exertis Almo podcast. We look forward to seeing you on the next. Who knows what the topic may be? Maybe 2110 or who knows where it's going to go. All right, we'll see you on the next episode.